Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. I am here today with Christine Rapin. Tell me I said that right, Christine. Did I say your name correctly?
You totally get a gold star. Well done.
Thank you so much. So Christine is an awesome lady. She's a coach who we connected on a call where she was actually teaching. And you know, I'm a sucker for stories, and she's an awesome storyteller. And I just want to welcome you, Christine. Welcome to today's session. How are you doing? Because it's morning for you where you are, right?
I am. I'm just about to start my day. And this is the super cool thing. Like I've always seen myself as like a global citizen. And so it is so cool. You know, we are talking from two very different parts of the world. You're just about to head into summer. And I watched the snowfall yesterday.
Yeah. So you're in Canada, and you know, anytime I meet someone from Canada, I remember this video that someone put out on YouTube. They had boiling water in a kettle, and then there was somewhere up in the mountains, and they just threw it up and went, you know, into and is that where you are at?
You can do that on occasion here. Yes, I live near the Rocky Mountains. So when people see pictures of Canada, often what they see is where I live. So turquoise blue mountains, blue sky. That is where I live in Canada. So I am like the picture postcard. But it's funny because Canadian kids, it doesn't have to be boiling water. It can actually just be, depends on how cold it is. You can actually just take a bottle of water as long as it's obviously not frozen. And yes, if you just take the cap off and throw it, it will freeze immediately if it's cold enough. And I actually thought that was a universal, anyone who lives in cold climates knows how to do, but I was in the States 2 years ago before the pandemic, showing my US colleagues that, and they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, you totally can do that. And so they were egging us on. And sure enough, my colleague, Derek, who lives in another part of Canada, it's 5 hours on a plane to get there, he showed them how to do it. And they were like kids at Christmas, just with their eyes lit up. And I'm like, how do you people, you live in Wisconsin, how do you not know how to do this? Weather is such a funny thing, right? But yes, I am the picture postcard Canadian landscape where I live, and it's snowy and just like a postcard right now outside.
Oh, awesome. I love the snow. I don't mind the cold. My wife hates it. So because I'm easy on both, she's like, we're not going to live in some place cold like that. But have you always lived in Canada?
No. And this is honestly, when people say, where are you from? It's probably the hardest question you have to ask me ever, because I really am a global nomad. I am Canadian. I'm Canadian born. I hold a Canadian passport, but I have actually lived in 5 countries, 30 cities, some cities more than once. So yes, I have mad packing skills. If you ever need a declutter, wow, I am fabulous for it, because I have to move it. So I don't use it. And the exception to that is books. I always keep books, even if I've not read them. I've really lived a lot of places, and I've traveled a lot of places. And so I just always had a love of people, regardless of where they are. And I've actually been to South Africa. I had the opportunity to go there because good friends of mine lived there for about 7 years. And one day when I was sort of in the neighborhood, and by the neighborhood, I mean in London, going to Dubai and thinking, well, I can get to South Africa after 4 years. It's quite a local.
That's close, like, yeah.
It's not local. Like, the right time zone.
Yeah.
So I'm already adjusted, because to fly from where I am now to South Africa is 26 hours to get there.
Yeah.
But we are here in the same place. How cool is that?
Really awesome. So why is, I mean, like 5 different countries. I mean, some people don't even ever leave their little town, let alone like their state. So how did you, why all these different countries? Why did you live in all these different places?
I would say in my early years, it was just a family habit. So when I was young, my dad was successful in his career. And so every time that he had to go find and solve a new problem, it usually was in a different location in Canada. And so we moved typically every 3 to 4 years when I was a kid. And I often think Christmas holidays started with we need to have a family conversation. It was like, where are we moving to now?
Oh, wow.
It was really exciting when it was someplace new and they had a sport team. It was less exciting when it was back to someplace I'd already been. And so that was sort of my habit when I was young, and it became my norm. And so I thought, well, why not? And it never occurred to me not to do it. And so when I was in university, I had the opportunity to study abroad. I took advantage of that opportunity. And I also then studied when I was an adult internationally. And if an opportunity wasn't right in my hometown, I didn't fear going to create it somewhere else. And it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's really taught me a lot about who I am. It taught me a lot about reinvention, and that people are people, regardless of where we are. And that doesn't mean whether I'm traveling there, whether I'm living there. I always want to just connect with people because we're driven by the same things. For all the fact that we think we're, unique to our country, habits, cultures, people care about their families, they care about the planet, they care about making an impact. And that's a human thing. And I'm always interested in the human story. And yes, that's why we connected, because we love stories. And it's always about the human side that give us connection, that give us inspiration. And so for me, I was curious about the world, and that led me to different parts of the world, and more parts still to come, I hope.
Yeah, awesome. I'm curious. Were you an only child?
I was not. I'm the youngest. I have an older brother.
So did all of them love? You have an older brother, one older brother. So
older brother.
How did he love the travel as much as you do?
That's a great question. Yes and no. So he definitely, when he had his son, he's like, I'm not going to be the dad who's always moving my kids around. So he had some obviously negative sides of the move. But the funny thing is, my brother joined the military when he was young, or a young man, and had been in and out of the military much of his life. And now he's retired as a vet. But the interesting thing is he always was really excited about a deployment. So he did like the travel. I don't think he liked the moving of it, but he had the opportunity to take tours with the UN and be in great places in the world. And yes, some not so great places, but he liked the travel side of it. So I think he liked the curiosity, but he didn't like the constant needing to go make new friends. And that was something that, it's a learned skill. And I think it's one of the things we forget how to do as an adult. And I think that's one of the reasons why we feel disconnected, or why we seek community. Because when you're young, school, sport, culture brings you to meet new people. But when you're an adult, if you're constantly the new person, you must be intentional about going to create friendships. Because lots of people don't get the fact that you're only here for a few years. And that's a skill that I had to learn. And I built a community, we might talk about that today, but because I just know the hardest thing is adults, honestly, all of us put up our hands and say, how do I make new friends?
Yeah. And I mean, I bring it up because I especially think about it because distinctions are really, really important. You mentioned about, people being different and actually the same in different cultures and different parts of the world. But certain things are just the same in terms of human nature. What we want, what we like, and and it's the same in business as well. The people that are struggling the most especially during these most interesting times, are the ones who are kind of secluded. They're not really connecting with other people. They're not really, and I mean, because that's the line of work that you do, right? So like some of the stuff that you do, you coach and you help people to grow their businesses, to do these different things. So when I'm very interested, I'm always interested in people's distinctions that they make, the conclusions that they come up with, and then go down this road that either leads to success or failure. But in the work that you do, how important is it to frame that? I mean, we spoke about story, framing that narrative, framing that story in the right way. Because you mentioned something very interesting. You said, it was the way you said it, like, I like to go and create new stuff. And most people wouldn't, they'd want to be in places where stuff is already existing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, and especially in your experience.
Yeah, I think actually we want both. And sometimes we have more courage to say one than the other. And that can be cultural, that can be our upbringing. But the interesting thing I think about people is that we are feeling isolated in a time that we're so connected in terms of capability from a technology point of view. And when I first started my journey, I always knew I would be an entrepreneur. And my whole story is the story of reinvention. It is the many moves. It is the different cultures. And yes, they've had similarities, but learning what you don't know about culture as an outsider is very interesting, because when someone says, well, that will never work, you're like, well, why? I don't have the same frame of reference. But you can build a bridge, and you build the bridge through one conversation at a time. And it's true that that one conversation at a time is one of the biggest things I teach, mentor, reinforce, and talk about a lot, because the way that you build connection, confidence, capabilities, and belief all come down to one conversation at a time. Too often we have too many conversations in our own head, but the key is community and feeling connected. And so my business was global way before the pandemic. So it isn't a new invention or reinvention. And what I tell people is when you start the path, there's a whole bunch of people that you hope will cheer for you and surprisingly might not. And so that can lead to even more isolation. And what you don't yet know is that there's a whole incredible community. Like there's 7 billion people on the planet. There is somebody who's going to get you. You have to find them. And you have to find them by talking to them or putting yourself out there. And that doesn't mean physically leaving your home maybe right now, but it does mean showing up in social platforms like how you and I connected. Because when you do that, I said, you'll find and realize the first person who might cheer for you on your journey could be a stranger. Not your best friend, not your parents, not your spouse, who might not understand this crazy vision that you have. And that doesn't mean that it might be entrepreneurship. It might be, I want to go live in a foreign country. It might be, I want to go back to school at 45, whatever that may be. That's the plot twist that we all decide to pick up and run with. That's what curiosity leads us to. I'm not happy living by somebody else's labels anymore. I got to go figure something else out. And yet that was why community was so important to me. And yet, even when you think I'm really feeling isolated or I'm not sure where to go, the one thing I said we really want is actually connection. We want to go make new friends. We want somebody to see us. But that's one of the scariest things we all feel is we want the desire to be seen. And it's really scary to put yourself out there to be seen. And that's the gap. And that's where I like to play, because I'm like, your story is unique to you. There's no mistakes. There are certainly chapters you probably don't want to talk about. There's some really epic wins, but it's not a highlight reel. We're people. We have good moments. We have tough moments. But what makes us unique is the ability to share our unique story. And by sharing your unique story is how you make an impact. And ultimately, one of the biggest drivers of human nature, in my own opinion, and for everything I've seen, is our biggest desire is we want to make an impact. I know that's true for me. I want to know my time here mattered. So I have to get out of my own way. I have to go make conversations and have to know I'm a work in progress, and that my business success, my life success, at one point, they were all strangers.
Yeah. And so it's really beautiful. And I want to talk a little bit about dealing with what you call the plot twists, right? So it's always great to start on the same page. So what in your definition is a plot twist?
Yeah, so I'll tell you where the plot twist comes from. I talk about it a lot, and I think all of us go, oh yeah, I know what a plot twist is. So the plot twist, of course, in any storyline, you're the hero in your own story, but everybody encounters unexpected circumstance, or where your expectation falls short, and it leaves you in a bit of a black hole or a vacuum. And many years ago, I'd seen a quote. I still have it in my desk. And I wrote it when I was probably facing some level of adversity, because the universe works that way. And it came to me during that period. And it said, when you hit something unexpected, say to yourself, plot twist, and keep going. And that sort of always resonated with me, because I think in my life, I said, if you look at it from 50,000 feet, you think there's this really clear storyline. And maybe that's the way I sell it to you. But it's not smooth sailing. And the zigs and zags were because there was an impact somewhere. And life happens, and impact happens to us all. Sometimes we foreshadow it and we expect it. Sometimes it completely blindsides you and takes you out. But you must decide in your hero's journey, do you pick yourself up and keep going? And sometimes that happens instantaneously and you just bounce like a rubber ball. And sometimes you go with your nails deep in the sand, deep in the earth, struggling 1 second, millisecond for an inch at a time. And for me, one thing I talk about is life is your plot twist. There are plot twists in all of our lives. Those are the pieces that actually make us connect to other people. And we don't want to talk about them. Sometimes they bring shame. Sometimes they bring excitement. Some of, my big plot twist to why I became an entrepreneur came out of the fact that I was fired. I knew I would be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to do something. I always felt really called to help people believe in themselves and to say, I can. That's what winds me up, it's so much fun to sit front row at somebody else's transformation and to know I played a part. And that's a ripple to their lives, to their community, to the world in general. But I was 1,400 kilometers away from home on a successful business trip. I walked into the bar and my boss and HR were sitting there. And I thought in a heartbeat, I'm about to be fired. I never saw it coming. And it dramatically changed the trajectory of my life. And I had to be a big girl, take a very deep breath and not run away and walk into that room. And, after that moment of impact, that's the plot twist, the dramatic change in direction. It's silent. Feels silent, feels heavy. And, I spent the next 17 hours lying on the bathroom floor crying, thinking what the hell just happened to my life. And having to make those tough calls home to say to our family, like, our life is dramatically different right now. And I didn't get out of bed thinking this was to be the case, but plot twists happen to us all. And so it is a chance to reset, redirect, head in a new direction. And you're writing that storyline. One step at a time. And not all steps are forward. I will tell you that. But I also know every plot twist builds your resiliency. And it's not that, life won't continue to have plot twists for you. They always will. But now every plot twist you encounter becomes the bricks and the foundation of your story. It becomes the foundation of why people will connect to you. It's the foundation. If you tell your story, you can be very successful in life. Own your journey. And when you do so, I just think that that's really the purpose we're here for. And for me, I talk a lot about the plot twist. I said, you can see where I am there, but I will tell you, I'm also 5 years out from that plot twist. I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I'm not writing them a greeting card to say thank you. I will be clear. I'm not that quite generous, but yeah, I know that it's shaped me and spurned me into a new direction. And for that, I'm thankful.
Yeah. I find it very interesting when I think about the problems that we encounter. I mean, like, especially like the experience we have, let's just say, in life, and then we make those we have to make those decisions and change maybe the direction that we're going in, or even the experience that we have, all spurn from these various plot twists that may occur, right? It's because there's a splinter that happens at one point or another that says, okay, because of this, I've actually do this, and then guess what? I learned X, Y, and Z down the line. But as human beings, we are so overtly, we don't like change that much, because we built something. It's kind of assumed. I mean, I was having a discussion with my wife yesterday. It's kind of assumed that we have this thing that things are gonna be the same like this forever, and then when things change, it's like, oh my gosh, then that statement where things, the only thing that's constant is change. But we kind of lull into this balance of like, no, it's going to always be like this. And then, so having to navigate these plot twists, I think in your life, it must have been easier for you to kind of expect that things happen. But in terms of your finding, have you seen that many people find it easy to just overcome these plot twists, that they notice that these plot twists are even happening? I mean, how do you feel that most people actually deal with plot twists?
Yeah, I think everybody goes through plot twists differently, and it's interesting. You'd think it would be easier. I think it's not. But going through a plot twist, there's that whole state, the grief cycle, and there's 5 stages. There's
Right.
It's not happening.
Yes.
There's I'm sad
Denial.
that the past. Yeah, there's denial. There's the moment of acceptance. There's a moment of rebirth, and that is true in a plot twist. And some plot twists are minor, or seem minor in the moment. Some feel cataclysmic. And the interesting thing about when you hit plot twists is, I would just tell you, you're in them, and they only look great in hindsight. In the moment, they all feel really tragic. It's like a butterfly, right? There's the gooey bit. No one talks about the caterpillar. They talk about caterpillar and they talk about the butterfly, but the middle bit is unrecognizable goo. And that's what it is. And so no matter how many times you go through it, you're still in this really unrecognizable place of glue, because you're in the becoming stage. And yet the interesting thing that I think people forget is, we do feel uncomfortable pressure in change. And so we think we don't like change. The opposite, though, is interesting, because we sort of make that as an acceptable cultural comment. Change is uncomfortable. I don't like it. The other side of it is, what do other people on the other end of the spectrum often feel? I feel stuck, bored. You know why? You stop growing. And you know what growth requires? Change.
Yeah, some gooiness.
So when I tell people, life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. You are always making choices with imperfect information, and living in your head isn't helping. Action is the key. So when you're going through it, I said, sometimes you see these plot twists coming and you're like, I know going to school will lead to new opportunities, or I believe, marriage is going to make me ultimately happier. But the difference is, happiness isn't the thing, it's the journey. It is actually in your becoming, which is uncomfortable, but without the whole desire for change, your number one complaint is, I'm bored. I feel stuck. Life is uninteresting. I want something exciting to happen. And the moment it does, you're like, well, I didn't mean it on that scale.
Yeah. It's like, I need that.
It will keep reminding you, and make your plot twist bigger and bigger until you pay attention. And that's sort of what I feel about mine. I think, I had small course corrections in my corporate career. The last one felt really big. And I keep thinking, every time something happens, I'm like reminded, I'm not meant to stay here. The reason they're getting bigger is I'm not paying attention. Maybe I should pay attention.
So let's just jump into this quickly. So I think when you talk about, so let's talk about a little bit about, let's just say, lessons that are not being learned. Mm-hmm. And because that seems to me like a distinction that you've made. So you made it up in your head, and you determined that the reason is because no one actually told you like that. No, Christine, is because you didn't listen to the lesson, and and now you're getting
I didn't get a greeting card.
So the question is like, making those distinctions, how do you help people actually? How can we actually as make the right distinctions between these? And feel like we are moving forward from these plot twists, because like so many people, they're like, like it's almost the same lesson over and over again, right? And we're doing the same thing, same result, same thing happens again. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do we then make a different decision that actually gives us something more of what we want, and then how will we know it is
there? You answered your own question. You might not even have known it.
Okay.
You said, how will it feel? The answer is feeling and intuition, because we are so stuck in the beliefs of what definition of success looks like. There's a million people who have influenced how you believe success looks like. And yet, when you're not living it, and there's a feeling, because it's a feeling of, I need something more. There's got to be more. This doesn't feel right. It's the instinct inside you. And so when I said, well, how do I know that I was relearning a lesson? Because of the energy of how I felt. When I'm doing something that is more in alignment with, I think, my purpose here, it feels different. There's less anxiety, there's less apprehension, there's a little more grace in myself. Maybe I give it to myself that, you're learning, but it is about energy, and the whole universe is energy. We go back just to, that simple thing is, what does your instinct say? And I think when you say, how do we make better decisions? It's owning what your own intuition is saying to you. Not listening to maybe what somebody else thinks you should do, because you're just shooting all over yourself. But you have to pause or slow down enough to listen to your own knowing. That takes time. It's a skill. It doesn't come easy to many. But sometimes that's where working with someone or having a confidant or using some kind of tools really help, because when you're stuck in the chaos of living by somebody else's expectation, you don't feel your energy because you're avoiding it. And yet somebody else can really see it clearly. And that's a gift I think I have, because I'll give you a perfect example. Yesterday, I was talking to a client who has just gone through a major plot twist, a good one. She's done something she has been wanting to do for years and years and years. And yet her energy was really low about it. And I was like, why? Let's talk about what's just done. The first thing you told me was you really wanted to launch a summit so that you could help caregivers. She has a real heart-centered need to help caregivers not feel guilty when they're caring for someone at the end of their lives, and to still be a person in their own right. And that's a very hard emotional landscape. So she's launched this summit, but she was feeling really crappy about it. And I said, why are you feeling crappy about it? How do you feel the event went? There's the word. How do you feel? And she's like, I'm really excited I did it. Why aren't you owning the excitement? Because someone told me it wasn't as successful as they had hoped. Well, that's somebody else's opinion. Somebody else's opinion never pays your bills, by the way, ever. So don't let them rule your decisions. And so I said, let's talk about the celebrations. Let's talk about what you learned. Let's talk about the growth. How uncomfortable was it? What would you do differently next time? And then, coming out of it, watching her from the beginning to the end is very different energetically. I said, this is your path. I can see it because your energy, when you're talking about amazing what I could do next time, feels like 100-watt light bulb. And you said, how do I know when I'm making right decisions? What does it feel like? Are you filled with anxiety, dread, fear? Butterflies are okay. And I said, the mental brain is one thing, but listen to your gut. Your gut is your second brain. It's the one that doesn't think with words. It's just feeling. Your gut will tell you if you are on the right path, and it will tell you if you're not. I said, are you excited? Is it choice, or is it dread? And I think, when you're going through these plot twists, I said, you're chucked into the deep end. If you could have the confidence to trust yourself, I truly believe you will always find your way. But you need to also recognize that somebody else's opinion will be really the first one you might trust. That might not always be the right one.
Yeah.
And that's why you're constantly, in that dissonance of saying, I think I want something different, but my world wants me to be something else. Maybe the world really needs you to own your story.
Yeah.
You know what it is. And when I work with clients, I think one of the biggest gifts that I have, or why you would ever work with a coach, whether it's me or someone else, is the first time you feel like you could say something out loud is often in that private confidence. But the goal is, we want to teach you from being able to say it out loud. Maybe that be writing it in a journal to, I made this big light bulb. How does the light bulb feel? You're going to need to say it out loud to me. That's your next step on the baby steps. Now, if you can say it out loud to me, how does that feel? Well, it feels like I'm owning it more. And eventually, through that transition, you're ready to say it to a small group of people, a wider audience, get in front of many people to make the impact you're here for. But it often really starts with, when people say, I don't know what I want out of life, I sort of call BS. It's because you actually don't want to say it out loud, but I bet you inside it's there. And that's the gut. That's your inner knowing. And sometimes we have to peel back all the other people's expectations and opinions. But and I just got to tell you, it's a feeling, and more than anything else, I'm sure somebody could scientifically prove it, but I said, I know when I'm in it. And then when I get frustrated by something else, and if my natural inclination is always frustration, that's a feeling too. Don't live there.
So it's how important, especially because for me, when you talk about being checking in on those feelings, it's got a lot to do with awareness, and my experience of emotion is either you're in it or you're not. So when you're like in the despair, you're like truly in the despair, and not really, without having the time to really label said emotion, you're feeling the feelings. So there's this element of having to recount, go back, stop, pause, re-look at things. And obviously in the coaching context is really, really important. But for most people, especially who don't have coaches, who don't have these people to reflect on, and when they're talking to people, they're not really talking about this from this perspective either. They're just talking about like maybe what you should do next. But how important, how can you help? What would you say to people to just help them sort of take that moment, that time to reflect? How should we actually go about doing this, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, my whole thought is, it's important to know where you came from, but you don't need to live there anymore. It gets behind you. And I always say a couple of analogies really help. Number one is just, like, if you're sitting in a car, just remember the size of a rear view mirror versus the front windshield. Okay, that's the analogy of life. Don't get caught up in the rear view mirror. It's one fraction of what's possible. It's behind you. So I always say to people, don't live in the past. And I'm not a big person of, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not in therapy. That's not my role as a coach. My role is to say, where did you come from? What are the foundations you want to stand on? There's some you don't. That's okay. You don't have to stand on them all. You get to choose that. But then I think the second piece is, don't spend time looking backwards. Look at the windshield. And I want you to, without judgment, focusing on the how, ask yourself two questions. Number one, what would your storyline be if that past was not true? And you didn't own it anymore. And you just say, what's possible? And that's the first one. It's like, well, what would be true if the opposite, or if I didn't believe that anymore? And the second bit of that is, what is possible? And it doesn't have to be what's possible for me. It's just what's possible in the world. Cast your gaze to that windshield of opportunity and say, if it's possible for them, it's possible, full stop. And that's the piece we want to focus on. It's like, I want to do more blue sky thinking. And I'm like, I can teach you skills because that's my wheelhouse. And there are people in the world. Knowledge is everywhere. Knowledge is not the problem. You have to believe it. It's possible, first, foremost, and always. And then you have to say, I'm willing to start to build the habits to get me there, which means I let go of the habits that got me to the past. Some you're going to keep by choice, and some you can say they don't longer serve me. And you get to reinvent yourself anytime you want, as often as you want. And, I said, like, there are chapters, I said, that in everyone's storyline that you don't want to talk about, but don't own them. I'm like, they made me who I am. They're behind me. And it's a footnote now. It's not the windshield of opportunity. And so I think you want to look at what would be true if I didn't believe that anymore, and what is possible in the universe. And then if you listen to that inner feeling and saying that possibility gives me butterflies, listen, because we can figure out the how. There's knowledge everywhere to help you. And there are people to help you, not necessarily retaining a coach, but there are people that will help you. But you can say, if it's possible for them, it's possible for me. Because don't ever put someone on the pedestal thinking because they did it, it was easy. Nobody gets to where they are because it's easy. They get to it because they keep showing up. And they might be 10 chapters ahead of you. That's 100% okay. Don't compare chapter 1 to chapter 10. and I heard an analogy last week that was great. We were talking about, launching a business, and we all want to, launch our business and be wildly successful in whatever success looks like. It's not just money, that's influence, that's impact, it's all kinds of things. But we want to be amazing from day one. And so did Apple. But there's a very big difference between the current model of Apple phone, whatever it is, 12, 13, 14, or somewhere in that capacity, and iPhone 1. Your first job is to get your iPhone 1 out into the universe, which is saying, I'm going to do something new. I might suck at it initially, but I know I'll never suck as bad today as if I just start. And I won't get better. I won't get to Apple 12 or 13 or 25 or whatever it is until I do that. So it's about what's possible. That's really how I think you start to make better decisions, is saying what's possible. And that's the thing that's always got me excited. You asked me at the beginning, why did I move so often? I was more willing to embrace the possibility than the limitations. It's like, I knew every time I took a job or started in a new city, I moved to cities I'd never been to, simply just with 2 suitcases. But I knew this much, and was really aware that I had a lot to learn. But I had a small place to stand to start. That was enough.
So did you always, how did you end up in the coaching as your chosen, field of expertise? Have you always been coaching people?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's sort of yes, I suppose I chose it, but sort of it chose me. Okay. So one of the things that I really have always cared about is people, obviously, and helping people to believe in themselves. And I'm really lucky because I think I got that from my parents. And I certainly know that wasn't comfortable. That expectation that you can do anything is a beautiful gift. It's also a heavy burden. And I can remember days in my life where I was like, I wish it would just be easier. And my dad said, who promised you it would be easy? At the end of the day, Christine, the measure of your life is looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, did I make good decisions today? And only you know that. You and your maker. Only, you don't have to explain it to anybody. You don't have to justify it. But if you can't hold your gaze, make better decisions tomorrow. That's what life is, Christine. That's what my dad always told me. And, when I've worked in the corporate world, I always knew I wanted to contribute and make a team stronger for my presence. Doesn't mean I was always great, but I was always really committed to helping us be better, growing, taking those uncomfortable actions, and betting on my team and myself to figure it out, not to be perfect, but to, imperfectly do things together and get stuff done that moved our needle forward. So I sort of always had done it in that capacity. And it was my way to connect to people. And to, when you are the new person, it's a way to connect. And that's really important. We all really seek connection. And it's interesting. So when I first started my business journey, I did not start as a coach, but I got involved in a global beauty and wellness business, and it was a side hustle. And I think side hustles are a really important strategy to learn to grow, because it is about business in a box. You're going to get mentorship. You're going to learn the personal development. You're going to learn the skills. It's low risk, low cost, but can be a great training ground to then maybe launch your next chapter. And it could be an additional income stream. You can do it, I say come a season or stay a lifetime. Those are your options. It's choose your own adventure. But a year into my business, I was working corporately, had my side hustle, and people in my side hustle community kept saying, you're doing something differently than I am, because you're seeing more success. And it seems like you're not necessarily working less, but not working 24/7. And I'm like, well, it is about small steps consistently, not the big swing for the fences and hit it out of the park. Because you can always succeed once. The question is, can you succeed multiple times? And so I just said, well, I can show you what I'm doing. And people started to say to me, and I said, well, the reason I think you're not succeeding is because you're dabbling. Are you in? Doesn't mean how quickly you get there, but are you in? Intellectually, with your gut, are you in? And if you are, you can do and succeed at anything. If you hesitate, you're not in, and everything feels it. The energy is different. So I said, but I can be more effective in 1 hour than 8 if I do the right things. And having been in business in a lot of different businesses and been in different countries working with different people, I had good foundation skills. I knew how to build relationships. I knew how to make a good impression. I knew how to network. I knew how to sell. And I had the disciplines that were needed to make those 1 hours really effective. And people kept coming to me saying, could you teach me this? And I need your opinion. I need your advice. And I like your positivity, and being around you feels energetically hopeful. I was like, I'm glad you feel hopeful around me. It's a beautiful compliment. But hope isn't enough. Do you want to do this? And it sort of led to the conversation of, I would pay you for this. And I was like, wow, plot twist. I didn't intend to be a coach, because I think coaching is a misunderstood profession. There's a lot of variation of competence in this industry. And I said, well, what I've got is credibility, I think, from my experience. And I think experience always trumps certification. I mean, yes, I have some business degrees behind me. That helps. But life was my teacher. And that led me into coaching, because people kept coming to me saying, I need some help. And I'm like, well, I can see, because I'm far enough away from it. You're so in the forest and the trees, you can't see your plot twist. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I said, 5 years ago, I was lying on the bathroom floor. Today, I run 2 businesses and have a really successful life, not just business, but life. And I don't work 24/7. So if you're someone who is struggling and working 100 hours a week for very little money, and you're not feeling satisfied, fulfilled, and purposeful, listen to your gut. It's telling you that something isn't right.
So let's I just want to go in there. I want to go in that for a little bit, because I mean, there are these different schools of thought around business that, you have to work really hard. And now, I think a lot of people are reading and they're learning, so they're like, you've got to work really smart. So but what is, I mean, you were talking, from what you're talking about, I think there's a mixture of smart and fulfillment, really like a more purpose-driven way of living. And I believe that this is this is what's emerging more now. What you meeting so many different businesses and business owners, entrepreneurs every single day. Where do you think people are sort of sitting on the scale? And where are they finding they're stuck, as we call it?
Yeah, well, I think I did actually just a video about this just in recent days. And I think there's 3 lies we buy into about entrepreneurship. And I think they're lies, because my evidence indicates that they're not necessary. But number 1 is this whole hustle culture, that you've got to hustle 24/7. And if you know that you're in, it's a foregone conclusion. So why do you need to, and you control time, and then in the sense of how much effort is important. You can't, you can't manifest anything if you just think it. You gotta go do something. So I think the one thing is that you have to be hustling 24/7. Well, your body's not physically, mentally, or capable of that. So don't think that that's necessary, because all it leads to burnout, and burnout's something we hear about all over the place. So stop hustling, because you know what it leads to? Burnout. That's not a win. I think the second lie we buy into is this idea that hard work equals success. That's not true. And you know it. You see it all around you. Just because you've worked hard doesn't mean it's a guarantee. Because if you're doing this, you're working hard on the wrong things, you're not going to see the results you need. And that's where I think, yes, working with somebody who's got business experience or ahead of you in chapter 10 is valuable. Doesn't mean you have to, retain their services, but model what they're doing, because there's clues, because success will leave clues, follow them. But it isn't about hard work. It's the right things being focused on consistently. And that can be an hour a day. That's how I built my first business. And it didn't happen overnight. And I was controlling that speed, but I knew if I just did the right things every day or small bits, the business would start to move. And it did, and it snowballed. And that doesn't matter the industry, because I see it in every industry. It's true. And the third thing I think that the lie that we buy into is that the only measure of result is the immediate one. And we can get really dissatisfied, which really means a missed expectation in ourselves in the result. But definition of success, you know, you say purposeful. I'm like, you actually have to first and foremost start by how are you measuring success? And you need to know that and remind yourself of that. And to me, one of the first things I talk to people about is you need to know, what does success look like for you today? It might not be a revenue number. That's okay. Don't own revenue numbers until that's a measure of success. It's a measure of success over time, but it's not necessarily a measurement of now. And the analogy we talk about, you know, is when's the best time to plant a tree? 10 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. But if I plant the seed today, I'm not sitting under the shelter of a tree for shade tomorrow. And so that's that, do small things consistently. So I think the world is waking up. And I talked about those 3 lies, because when I say them, people are like, yeah, I kind of get it. I'm like, okay, so if that's a lie and you're no longer, again, being prepared to buy into it, what would the world look like differently? What the possibilities do you see in your world if that wasn't true? So what does flow look like? How does it feel? What would you do every day? Who do you want to play with? What kind of impact do you want to make? And then what are the skill gaps you have that you need to get there? Because you have to model good behavior and build the foundation. But success is yours to define. And you do need to realize, they said manifesting is 100% of belief in truth is there, because it's possible. And that's why I said to you earlier, one of the things I think you need to look at is what happens if that's not true, and what is possible. And you can look around you and say, if it's possible for them, it is possible for me. If I have discipline, if I focus on the right things, if I believe in myself, and I believe in the journey, and I believe in the impact. And people are waking up to say, it's not enough to simply be busy. We've held on for so many years. I don't know if it's been forever, but it feels like it, that busyness is a badge of honor. And the world is talking a lot more about mental health, about self-care, about not burning yourself out. You must have a vision that pulls you forward, not just the drive to make it happen. And I know I've been called on my own reflection by people I admire and reflect, saying, the vision is clear, you're on the right path, stop driving so hard. And the moment I stop being tied to the outcome in a specific time, window dressing, it shifts more quickly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to push water uphill in a spoon. It's not working. But the moment I say, just hold true to my message, hold true to getting in front of the right people, talk to people, make relationships. But that's when I get the phone call saying, I didn't even know you were in my world, but I'd like, that I'd like to work with you, or I want to be in your community, or I want to just see what you're doing and take advantage of, the material I put out into the world. I don't control what you do with it, but I just know I made an impact. And that's my measure of success. Am I growing? Am I planting seeds? Because the funny story you asked me about, did I start out as a coach? I said, no, I started out in a different business that led to coaching, and I do both today. But the irony is that first business opportunity came to me on a random Wednesday that I wasn't prepared for. Plot twist. I didn't think on Wednesday I would start a business, and by Friday I had. And the person who introduced me to an opportunity was someone I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. Someone I had worked with that wasn't a personal friend, so we hadn't connected in 10 years, but I had somehow planted a seed 10 years ago that I had curiosity, drive, and an interest in doing something to make an impact. And somehow I planted a seed I didn't even know I planted. And so she had, to me, in many ways, come out of the blue. And I said, and I would never have sought this opportunity, interestingly enough, although I knew I wanted something. So I had broad enough view, and I had done the exercise of what would be possible if I let go of job titles, if I let go of salary expectations. What do I really want to do? How do I want to play? What do I want my ideal life to look like? And that's just a blue sky conversation I think you should all do regularly. And I wrote it down. And then when this opportunity came my way, it felt uncomfortable. And I had lots of reasons of I'm too busy in my head of why I couldn't do it. And then I looked at myself in the mirror with my dad in my head. And I said, this is infinite possibility. And you're hesitating to bet on yourself. You're better than that. live up to your potential. This is possibility. You control the cards, you control the opportunity, but why would you not take this opportunity and run? And I did in a heartbeat, then change my mind, plot twist again. And yet the reason I did say yes was because this opportunity could provided me exactly what I had wanted in a frame, in a business, in an industry that I never would have said yes to. But I could see the overlap, and I was like, this is it. This is the start. It's the catalyst. And I said, just, sometimes we really get stuck in the how. And at the end of the day, the how will come later. There are people that can show you how, because there's just somebody in the journey further along with you. And we will, as entrepreneurs, always reach back to help. But I laugh because I look at it now and think, was it me following along, or was it me creating it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe both.
I think there's so much in like the questions that we ask ourselves when these plot twists occur, that will really help us either take on the plot twist in, like you say, standing ourselves up for the challenge, or kind of just hiding away from it. But it's really important, the questions we ask, and sort of who we have in our circle, in our community, that we can actually rely on. Because like you say, there's certain people that maybe are further along that journey than us. But then it's about asking those people those really good questions, or not really good questions. This is something that's going to help you get onto a road, that's going to help you get on whatever path you need to. And I mean, we're living now in a world where there's so much that we need to change in the way that we think and the way that we behave, where businesses are changing the way that they interact with their employees, that you might find that you don't really, I mean, there's an explosion of entrepreneurs now coming into the market. We are finding that there's I mean, with that, we're changing. You just mentioned that you're the type of person that likes that, you were kind of had that nomad culture. And now today we can do that. I don't know if have you ever heard of Entrepreneur 5.0? Have you ever heard of that phrase? So we're in that space right now, right? Where you can live. It's not just about this like nomad culture. It's really, you can live your purpose in a nomad culture, anywhere in the world, and do exactly what you are driven to do in your life. And have that impact and have it all almost. It's like really an exciting time to be alive. And I guess where I'm trying to, the message now to people, what are you seeing? Are you finding that are people managing to sort of pick these pieces up and piece them together? Because there's a lot of introspection in what you were sharing, a lot of it. The blue skies theory, I love that thought, because it takes courage to dream in that way and then take action towards that dream. Because now we're also at the point of recording this, of talking about this. We're in December right now. So, when we move into 2022, it's this new beginnings almost feeling, right? So leading into that, how do we now, maybe there's no plot twist. Maybe maybe this is the plot twist, listening to this podcast and realizing, okay, wait, I need to go for what I want. Yes. I know you've mentioned a lot, you've brought so much value, so much, you really shared so much, but I just want to sort of distill this for somebody. If I was like, I've listened to all this, Christine, it sounds all awesome, I'm on board, I'm in, I want a new blue sky, I want this. How do I get this done? Because I'm burnt out, I'm living in this, my kids hate me, and I hate life right now. Whatever it is. So how can I actually start to live that life that I could dream of?
Yeah, I think to me there were always two things, and I'm just going to speak from my own heart, because this is the thing that spurred me. Is number one, I would ask myself, Would I be happy in my life 5 years from now if I stayed the course? Because truly, you talked about that, the comfort of, I just want to be in the normal. I want to stay in the same. Well, I will tell you, if you just stay doing the same right now, 5 years from now, you'll be exactly where you are. Does that make you happy? Excited? Or feeling like I'm a sense of panic, if that's the case? Because you need to, that's the fire, that's the spark. And I looked at that and thought, no, 5 years from now, I don't want to be in the same place. That to me isn't success. So I have to own that. And every time I'm really scared to take an action, I remind myself of, if I don't take the action, that vision board that I created is just a picture. But I'm worthy of my dreams. So that's the first question I think you want to ask. The second one is, is sort of also the same thing, a retrospective, because, yes, you think that this is all, like, I didn't sit down and have heavy thinking. So don't feel like that's how it happened. It's sort of like hindsight. I realized I was thinking, but I wasn't. I didn't wake up today to say, let's go journal that out. I wasn't there yet. I might do that now, but I wouldn't have done it 4 years ago. But what I did also do when I looked at, do I feel hopeful of what's possible? And again, you can create hope. I want to be a hope dealer. And that's what I want out of my community. It's what I want and the impact I make in the world. I said, I want you to know you can. And you can borrow my belief until you have your own. But my goal and our goal, if we ever work together, is to build it together. And whatever that looks like, doesn't mean a formal coaching relationship. It could be just being part of my community, is starting to see I can, or joining cool tribes and connecting to cool people that help expand your vision. And then realize, at the end of your day, do you want to look back on your life and say, what an epic ride? Or do you want to get to the end of your life thinking, I stayed safe on the shores, I'm well preserved, and I don't have any battle scars? And that's going to be a personal choice. I happen to have looked at those things and thought, I don't want to be where I am right now in 5 years. That's not growing. And my measure of life and success had always been growth. I also went, I'll never die of embarrassment. True, it feels crappy, but I would rather experience than regret. And I had to cast a vision and say, what if? What's possible out there? And the funny thing is, my dreams didn't start big. I want you to know that too. Like, now I want to impact 1 million lives, and I'm moving in a much bigger direction and get to meet cool people, and I'm joining cool things, and I'm collaborating in new ways. But when I started my first business, I wanted 2 things: time freedom, financial freedom, like everyone else who wants the entrepreneurial dream. But I wanted it because I knew I needed to be near my family if they needed help. I wanted to not have to ask permission to take vacation, because I think that's ridiculous and so archaic. And I wanted to retire early to actually play. It was really simple, maybe superficial, but that's where I started. The vision's gotten much bigger because people around me saying it could be bigger. So I want, if you take anything from this call, I want you to know the vision could be bigger. I want you to spend a bit of time on hope. What if your storyline changed and your plot twist, you chose it as an opportunity to reinvent yourself? Because it is. Will it be easy? Not necessarily. Is it worth it? 100% if it's true to your feeling of hope, storyline, and impact. And you don't have to do it by yourself. That's all I also want you to know. You can connect to so many cool people. We both know amazing people that would help you on your journey. But most importantly, you have to decide.
And it's that continuous decision, right? It's continuously and always asking yourself that those great questions are just around, like, if my life was still like this 5 years down the line. I love that question. How would I, is this what I'd want? And I think
rate it on a scale of 1 to 5 and say, I love it, or I'm feeling a little like I took an easy route.
Yeah.
And we judge ourselves that way, but also realize nobody else's opinion will change your dreams. And my final thought on this is just to also remember, no one else's opinion will ever pay your bills. So don't let somebody else's opinion keep you in a path. You can change paths. But the other truth is that this is your story.
Mm.
You are writing it every day. You will have chapters that are amazing, chapters that are not. But this is your story. The world needs your story. You've got unique talents, skills, and ways to make an impact. I know that from every person I met. I've learned something from them. I felt their energy. It's what makes us human. It's what we want to create our legacy around.
Mm.
Have courage to believe in yourself. You'll light the world on fire, and in a way that you were intended to. And it's funny because, you know, this is my journey to where I got to now. I'm curious and excited by my future because I said, be a hope dealer. Your future
That's
can
awesome.
be what you create. It is.
That's so
You're
awesome.
creating it every day, right?
So Christine, you mentioned that you have a community that where you're sharing a whole bunch of content and you know where you're dealing in hope, and where one can get it in spades. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So one of the very first things I did when I started my journey is I started a community, and it's called Chasing Dreams and Making a Positive Impact. And it was a community intended for people going through plot twists, looking through a reinvention, or who are earlier stage entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that might be going through a reinvention in their own storyline. And I said, you might start a business and end up in 3 or 4 different ways before you find the right one. That's okay. You're learning all the time. And so the community is on Facebook. It's a private group, but you're all cordially invited to come join us.
Awesome.
And it's the place where I go in. It's a free community. There's no cost to be a member currently. And I go in, I give coaching or business advice twice a week live. And it's usually about something I'm either dealing with in my own head, because again, I am just like you, going through my own plot twists, figuring out my own storyline, writing my own story, and sharing either what's in my head, which I need to remind myself of, like, stop it, get out of my own way. You'll need that reminder too. And I know that because we're in this together. And I also will talk about things that I think are really topical. If I see that, you know, that my clients are feeling this way, then I know that other people are feeling that way. So I come in, they're short snippets, usually under 10 minutes, just to give you a bit of guidance, inspiration, a couple days a week. You'll get positivity. You'll also get balance. You know, I talk a lot about self-care, and I talk a lot about, it isn't about hustle. It isn't about working 24/7. So yeah, my dog features on there on creation yesterday saying, hi, it's like time to play. Why are you working? Because I want you to see this is how I do it, because at very little impact here, I'm like, I just hope it shows you it's possible. And you can sit in the community until you're ready to stand. If you're looking for connections or different industries than the one I am part of, then ask. I'm sure we can help connect you to somebody. It's a place to network. And it is a place for you to see people doing their thing, defining success for themselves, and seeing the diversity, the journey, and also the kindness and support that is out there. Because I said, when you first start a reinvention or the journey of entrepreneurship, it can feel really lonely. So I said, it's not lonely if you find the right tribe. Come date ours, come be part of it. At minimum, I hope it brightens your day, shows you what's possible. Borrow our belief until you're ready. And at some point, if you ever feel like every week I'm talking to you, let's have an actual conversation.
Right.
I won't bite.
Now, awesome. And what we'll do is we'll drop the link to the group in both the article, be on the website, and even in the links to the podcast or the audio version of this. So definitely, I think that's so awesome. I mean, I think we can never have enough realism. As you're going through your journey, you know, I might learn things that we might be experiencing the same thing. You've got a different perspective on it, and that just gives me this is why I've always loved to travel, because you could always take a little spin from country A and put them in country B, and it'll be an absolute hit, you know. And I've always found that super fascinating about different things in different spaces. So this is just always a thing that we can learn from each other. and experience each other and learn from others' experiences. And I just think it's really, really awesome. So definitely going to put a link to that, Christine. Thank you so much. So awesome.
It's been super fun. And, you know, I want to give you huge credit, huge props, huge thank yous, because you're blazing a trail too. You know, you've got your own journey, your own plot twists that have led you to where you are. But I love the light that you're shining.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I love what you say. You know, the story is important because many people don't want to tell their story. And some people get all stuck in their story. So it's that play on both, you know, being able to learn from other people's story, appreciate yours, and continue to evolve it as time moves on. I think those are so crucial. I love chatting to you, Christine. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thanks. You too.